Good afternoon, everybody. It's Josh Friedman again. So today I'm going to talk a little about my philosophy and some of my life experiences, perhaps as well. Now, in a sense, I may not know where to begin because there's a lot to be, I would say, involved with that. And that's especially because, as it turns out, I've been through various differing and contrasting, and in some cases, as some may say, contradictory experiences regarding my education, the sort of schools I went to, some of the environments I've been a part of, and even just the very areas I've been in, whether it be different countries and different communities. But if you put it all together, just that alone, shows a certain ethos of, like I said, where there's a lot of involvement involved, where there's multiple factors to be mentioned and or considered. Now, again, why am I doing this? Because honestly, to put it as straightforwardly as possible, I feel like this sort of voice in the Jewish world is missing. I genuinely believe that, for example, you look up online, it won't take long before you see this figure named Jordan Peterson, right? And who is he? Well, he's this political analyst who's a psychologist and a philosopher. He's considered all these different things. And he, at this point, he carries a big voice in our society today for whatever reason, but he does. And honestly, he's very intelligent and very impressive. And he has a lot of views on religious matters as well. He's, in fact, if you look at some of his descriptions that you could find online, part of his particular study, even psychologically speaking, is the study of religious meaning and significance and symbolism, something like that. But that's also one of his major areas of study, apparently. But now he carries a big voice, in today's world. And that's great. And I'm so happy for him. But, and you'll find a lot of people in the Jewish world and even the Orthodox Jewish world that actually tune into him. And, and his voice carries a certain level of authority even to them. And there's nothing wrong with that. It makes sense, if anything. But I just want to point that out. But why does that happen? And why does that happen? We understand that Jordan Peterson isn't Jewish. In fact, he's Christian. But, you may even find people in the Jewish world, and I'm just using this as an example, but I'm bringing out a point. You may find people in the Jewish world that, they'll look up to him, and he will fill this sort of gap that no one else in the Jewish world is filling. Rather, this person, Jordan Peterson, who's non-Jewish, he's filling that gap, right? So that means that, in my opinion, again, Jordan Peterson is one example, but if you hang on to the point, in my opinion, there is a gap that we are experiencing here in the Jewish world, where there is a missing element, or person, or whatever you want to call it, that should be in the Jewish world somewhere that we're just not experiencing as straightforwardly as we'd want to. And what is that? Well, I think it's this. It's very nice that the Jewish world is obviously filled with many amazing people, and when it comes to who we listen to or the sort of ideas that we are exposed to and that we can grapple with and be inspired from, well, generally speaking, in a lot of cases, the major influence of such is from many rabbis. Let's start with that. Rabbis is a big one, and it should be, but that's just the story. Rabbis takes up a big part of that in our life. And again, there's nothing wrong with that, but let's hang on to the point here. We're trying to find what we're missing. So we have a lot of rabbis that inspire us in many ways. That's one thing. And another thing is we have, there's a Jewish channel, very popular Jewish channel now called Meaningful People. We do have, various meaningful people that inspire us as well. It does exist, and that's great. But, in the Jewish world, though, we're a very thinking people. And a lot of us actually end up going through a lot of various experiences, contrasting experiences, and we actually find that more people than we realize tend to use their own brain in the Jewish world. I actually compliment us on that a lot. I do think there's a high element of people that are a little too brainwashed or too much of a follower mentality in the Jewish world, and that definitely is something to mention and, address, I should say. But I also realize that, there are a lot of people that are otherwise, more than you would even realize. There are a lot of people that are trying to use their own brain in life, which is exactly what you should be doing, right? But now, for this great number of people relatively in the Jewish world that actually do like to use their brain, it would be very helpful for them to be inspired by a certain element that they're missing. Because like I said, we have a lot of rabbis already, and we have a good number of meaningful people, no pun intended, but you may find these meaningful people on a channel such as Meaningful People. But there's still a missing element of, well, if you want to use your own brain, and you want to have genuine thoughts, perhaps thoughts that are better developed even outside the voice of just rabbis. Something that is more comprehensive or more relatable even, or down to earth. And I'm being honest, this is how I see it, Well, then maybe this space of rabbis and some of these meaningful people, maybe there's still something missing, because between the rabbis and the meaningful people, you have the rabbis themselves, and then you have the meaningful people that they come to bring whatever message they bring, but they're still speaking under a certain ethos. They're still speaking under a certain influence, under a certain rabbinical influence, under, because let's say they'll come to a channel like Meaningful People. Well, they know their audience. They're afraid perhaps to say certain things a certain way, or they're not afraid, but they filter things a certain way. You don't know. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. But it's just one example of this. Or even if they're not filtering anything, even if they're totally genuine, even if their message is totally genuine, they may just be speaking in a certain particular context, which is what's happening. Because this whole world of what we have today of rabbis and meaningful people, these are two very connected worlds in our Jewish world that are basically working by, I should say, the same ethos and the same basis. But yet there is something missing. And I think what's missing is that element, that figure of whatever sort, that could come and philosophize. I know it's a big word, but hear me out. That could come and philosophize. That could come and use its brain and bring its own messages that it comes to in authenticity. That is actually missing. That does not really exist here. That's why so many people in general gravitate towards Jordan Peterson, whether Jewish or not, from any world. You have so many people that gravitate towards him because he is that voice. That sort of voice is missing in a lot of places, but it's also missing in the Jewish world, as we understand. And so I think that the Jewish world needs that voice again. And, this is what I really mean by this. It's really interesting, because if you look at a figure like Maimonides, right? Maimonides was a rabbi, obviously. He was one of the greatest rabbis in history. But Maimonides is also regarded as a philosopher. And it's my belief that Maimonides actually filled those two roles properly. He did fill the role of a rabbi properly, and he filled the role of a philosopher properly. And that is actually why a lot of people gravitate towards Maimonides. You see what I mean? Because on the one hand, you can relate to him as a rabbi, and many people obviously do, especially in the yeshiva world. Whether it's the yeshiva world or any other sort of yeshiva world, but in the yeshiva world, a lot of people do relate to Maimonides as a rabbi. In the yeshivish world, people are learning his stuff all day. People are learning the Mishnah Torah all day, and let's say his commentaries on Mishnah. You get my point. This is very normative, thankfully, in the Jewish world. People are definitely relating to Maimonides as a rabbi, but also, people can relate to Maimonides as a philosopher, and that's really significant. I wish that more people would relate to him as a philosopher than we already have, but that just relates to my thoughts on that there's a bigger need for authentic thought in the Jewish world. But hey, to be a cultural critic to that extent right now, I don't mean for it to be preemptive. I mean, that's something that will be discussed. But otherwise, however, the space is still missing because Maimonides is someone who's not alive anymore, literally speaking as a person who's alive. Maimonides is not alive. Maimonides has not been alive for centuries. His works are alive, his energy is alive, and his messages are alive, obviously. But still, that is not the same as someone else who is alive. And so I believe that what the Jewish world is missing is that person who is alive today, for our generation to be a Maimonides. And even if he's not the Rabbi Maimonides, he could just be the philosopher Maimonides, and that's still acceptable. I don't think this figure that I'm speaking of has to be a rabbi. No, just be a philosopher, be Maimonides, or be that part of Maimonides. That's actually what I think is missing. You know what I mean? And so I feel like, and honestly, because I believe this is missing in our world, and because I believe that because I have this sort of interest, I can contribute something. Well, that is why I'm taking on at least some level of personal responsibility to bring that forth within our world, personally. But obviously, I would hope that this would now be done on a grander scale. But that's what I wanted to pinpoint. And that is what I think is missing. Because even those meaningful people that I mentioned that aren't rabbis, they're still usually speaking within a context of they're thinking of like, what's it called? They preemptively assume a sort of audience that they're speaking to, which is very much influenced by a rabbinical world, which is not a problem, but it is. But yet they're also speaking to a rabbinical audience as well, so that makes a big difference in how you're going to filter what you may say, maybe. And ultimately, these people are speaking from somewhat of a rabbinical context. It's just a fact. And I know that may sound like I may sound heretical to some, like what do I mean to imply by rabbinical context? Does that mean that something is missing because you come from a rabbinical ethos? That's not what I mean. I just mean that the rabbinical ethos of today has created a lack. That is what I believe. And if I were to define that, I would hope you would not find me as a kofar or a heretic. But that's a different discussion. But I do genuinely believe that the rabbinical ethos found in our world today has created a lack, because it has created a lack in the element of thought, where if you reach certain areas with too much of a level of authenticity, you may be regarded as wrong or as heretical in some way or another. That is what I'm referring to. And I think that's really sad, because I'll tell you why it's sad. It hasn't always been this way. Back in the time of Maimonides, even though Maimonides' own books were getting burned at some point because people thought it was too influenced by non-Jewish thought, but I still guarantee you, back in that time of the Rishonim, in that sort of time period, there was actually I really genuinely believe this. There was a bigger open floor for thought at that time. There wasn't as much Pharisaical control over what people were saying and thinking. I'm sorry to use that word, but it's a great way to describe it. And that's actually why there was even more opportunity for someone to go and learn Torah and develop their own rabbinical, I would say, qualification, and end up becoming another Rishon, actually, because people were more attentive to each other back then than they are now. There was definitely a lot of dynamic thought going on and contrasting thought, but people were more attentive to each other back then. And it was easier for someone to end up being considered or looked up to as, wow, well, this is someone great who has great thoughts and ideas and opinions, and this person would then become yet another Rishon. It was actually more relevant back then than it is now, because now there has been created a system, a society, and an ethos, a rabbinical ethos that creates certain boundaries, and that's the word I'm looking for. It creates certain boundaries, yet those boundaries they bar us off from our true potential in thought, and that is the problem. So that's why I come to fill this space, in whatever way I can, because if we're to get into my own philosophy, well, one thing is I believe that if you have certain beliefs and certain ambitions, if you think that there's a lack in your life or in the world, well, as Pirkei Avos says, Makom she'ein ish ishtadel lios ish. In a place where there is not a man, try to be a man. So it's really indicative of the fact that, well, if you're the one to come up with the problem, if you found the elephant in the room, then you must escort the elephant out of the room yourself, because if you keep the elephant in the room, the elephant may just trample over everyone, if you just let it stay there for long enough. And I think that's the message with that. So yes, in the place where there isn't a man, try to be a man. If you don't believe that this problem is going to sort itself out, you better sort it out. Otherwise, it ain't going to be sorted out. And then things will go the opposite direction. I think that things have been going the opposite direction because of this certain ethos that I would say the Jewish world has actually been suffering from. I think part of the reason why people do struggle with Judaism in today's world and why people sometimes go off the derech or whatever you want to call it is because they actually don't feel enough freedom in their own thoughts and their own way of relating to Judaism and relating to spirituality and God. So much so that people, it's interesting because in today's modern world, within this rabbinical ethos, people are actually told, well, we're very open-minded and you are allowed to have your own thoughts and we respect your own thoughts. Just try to be down to earth and grounded and, don't try to just accept premises that are heretical, but otherwise you'll be cool. People are told things like that, and then people just, try to do their own thing in life, to put it that way, and then they are trampled upon by this elephant at some point or another. They are. People will end up looking down on them for thinking certain things, or doing certain things, as in relating to Judaism a certain way. This is what happens. We're in a very controlling society, yet in a very hypocritical way, which makes it even worse, much more deeply worse. Because we're in a society that claims open-mindedness, yet it is more closed-minded, I think, than any generation previous. I think the generation, I'm being honest, I think the generation where Hasidism started, or the generation by Maimonides, right? Or in general, the generations of the Rishonim, and a lot of other generations, I actually think those were more open-minded generations than what we have today. And so much so that, you know what, and to be honest, because everything has its good and bad, it could be part of the reason why by the 1600s, when the Shabtai Tzvi became more relevant, that could be part of the reason why, and that was like very closely before Hasidism, but that could be part of the reason why people actually ended up believing in the Shabtai Tzvi and going along his sort of movement. Could it be because people actually were anyway more open-minded than we may find now? Something tells me that if Shabtai Tzvi were to try to do the same sort of thing now, actually he has a much less chance of success by the mere fact that we're less open-minded. Now that's not good. Yes, what Shabtai Tzvi may have also not been good, but just because we're going to avoid evil because we decide to have less potential, no, that is not good. That is not good. But that also, I think, relates to a certain facet of my philosophy, which is, people talk a lot about Gedarim. I mean, I don't know how, I wouldn't say they talk a lot about it, but it's definitely a very relevant topic in the Jewish world, especially the Orthodox Jewish world. Gedarim, right? As in fences, borders, boundaries, right? Because we see throughout rabbinical literature, at least here and there, throughout rabbinical thought, that rabbis have come to set certain religious boundaries within our Judaism. That's probably the wrong word, but within our service of God, they come to set certain boundaries, which means that they have decided to create a concept of boundaries where the Torah didn't mention you can't do this or that, or the Torah didn't mention that you can't go along this mahalach. I'm sorry for I missed the word, but where the Torah didn't say that you can't try this thing out or try that thing out. That's how I'll put it. But now the rabbis want to come and say, actually, no, you can't do this or that, or you can't try this thing out or that thing out. So they come to create boundaries or bounds, gedarim, you understand, fences. But well, I think that of course there's value in the rabbanim, in the rabbis creating these fences, and that's why they have done so. I think that there's a misconception. I don't think that came to tell us that, if the rabbis could create fences within Judaism, therefore, if you yourself could create certain fences to totally hold yourself back from ever having these sort of yetzaharas, from ever having these sort of evil inclinations, to ever end up doing the wrong thing in this area or that area, yes, if you're somehow able to find the fence to prevent yourself from that completely, certainly do so. No, I think that's a misconception. I don't think that was ever the implication of why the rabbis have come to create fences. Because if someone actually has that sort of philosophy, they end up minimizing their own potential. Because their thought process is, if I minimize this potential of mine, if I create these fences, thereby not allowing potential for evil, well, then I'm protecting myself more. Yet you're doing so knowing that also minimizes the potential within it for good. That is not good. That you are not supposed to do, and the concept of fences created by rabbis was never intended to do so. I don't believe so. Then you would ask me, well, what is the concept of fences that the rabbis have created? Well, I think the answer is, if there's an area that the rabbis genuinely thought that there is such a high potential for evil and such an irrelevant potential for good in these circumstances and in this generation, etc., then perhaps in that context they created fences. That's probably what happened. But that was done in their own wisdom, right? That was done in their own wisdom with that understanding that they possessed. That does not permit us as our own people to now just decide, oh, let's create our own fences, thereby minimizing our own potential. Why? In order to protect ourselves from potential evil. That does not give us that permission. This was only done sometimes in certain contexts by the wisdom of the rabbis, where they understood that no, really, the potential for good in these contexts are so irrelevant that yes, we must protect the Jewish people. So, it's a more collective way of thinking. This does not permit us to now apply, to now misapply this philosophy to ourselves, to now have it overstretch into things where they shouldn't have stretched, and thereby minimizing ourselves. Judaism does not permit someone to minimize himself, and that is the message I'm bringing across. So now when I say that makom she'ein ish hishtadel liyos ish, that in a place where there is no man, try to be a man, I want to say that it relates to another major facet of my personal philosophy, which is that I was once talking to a client. I don't want to get into the details of that so much, like, where is this client? What am I working in? Doesn't matter right now. But to put it very vaguely, I was once talking to a client who had certain concerns, obviously, and he didn't know what may be the outcome of certain things, which is very normal for everyone. We all experience this sort of anxiety. But I told him, listen, this is all completely irrelevant. Stop trying to overanalyze everything, because all you could do is try. You can only try to be. You can only try to do. So when Pirkei Avos says, when the tremendous wisdom of the rabbis say that in a place where there is no man, try to be a man, they're saying try to be you. When there isn't you, try to be you. Because everyone, obviously, in this world has a certain purpose, has a certain personal purpose that no one else can fulfill, only you can fulfill. That's part of this proverb. But it doesn't say that when there is no man, you be the man. That's not what they said. They said when there is no man, try to be a man. Because all you can do is try. Yes, your main purpose in life is to be you and to fill the space that has been lacking, that only you can fulfill. But that can only be done through trying to do so. It cannot be done through literally doing so. It can only be done through trying to do so. Why? Because as the Gemara also says, that everything is in the hands of heaven except for the fear of heaven. Hakol b'yedei shemayim chutz me'ira shemayim. Right? And I think these two proverbs go completely hand in hand. Everything is in the hands of heaven except for the fear of heaven. Meaning, you have the choice to fear heaven or not to fear heaven. Right? That is your choice. But everything else is totally not your choice. But of course, when we say everything is in the hands of heaven except for the fear of heaven, the fear of heaven, on the one hand, we mean fear of heaven and whatever that significance that holds, whatever that means. But moreover, we mean it's symbolic of the concept of free choice itself. Because of course, any free choice that we make in this world, any ambition that we have should all be with the intention of fear of heaven. Now, fear of heaven doesn't have to mean being afraid, this sort of negative or anxious emotion. That's not what it has to mean. Of course, we're speaking of something much more lofty, but that is the concept. So in other words, everything has to be l'shem shemayim. Everything you do in life has to be for the sake of heaven, right? So in other words, what the Gemara means that everything is in the hands of heaven except for that which is for the sake of heaven. But that means that yes, you can try to do things for the sake of heaven, just the outcome is not in your hands. That's why it says in Pirkei Avos, try to be a man. Because maybe you can't be a man. Maybe you will try, but you won't be a man. Maybe you'll still be a little pipsqueak. At least you tried. That is all in the hands of heaven. You just have to try. So that means that you trying to be a man, you trying to be the person that you are, that is for the sake of heaven. That is the fear of heaven. That is the fear of heaven. You trying to be the person you're meant to be, that is fear of heaven. But everything else is not in your hands. It's in heaven's hands, but it's not in your hands. Which is so significant because that actually is a source of such strength. To some, it may sound like a source of weakness, but it's not a source of weakness. It's the exact opposite. You just have to look at it with the right lens. It's the greatest source of strength. Because at least we're admitting that we are human, we're not God, and we can't control everything. In fact, we ultimately cannot control anything, philosophically speaking. But we do admit that there is one faculty that was given to us that we can control. And that itself is the greatest source of strength. That makes us strong, because that makes us unique from everything else. We know that it makes us unique from all the angels, religiously speaking. Angels don't have free choice, we do. But we also know that it makes us unique from all the animals around us that don't have free choice or don't have it in the way we do. You understand? So that means that you use this faculty of free choice. You must use it the right way. You must use it to be the person that you are to be. You need to use it to be you. But you can only try. But that trying, that is being you. Because trying means the choice to do. Trying is the choice to do. That's why these two proverbs go hand in hand. Trying just means make the genuine choice. Try to do it. It may not happen, but try to do it. And when you try to do it, then you now bring forth that spark, that inner essence and energy that is you. That is what you're doing. So, again, in a place where there is no man, try to be a man. Because that trying to be a man, that fills that place where there is no man. But it's only the trying, it's not the doing. Big mistake that everyone makes. It's not the doing, it's the trying. But it's the greatest source of strength because now we know that, listen, we're human, we're not perfect, and we're never going to be perfect, and there's no way to control you being perfect. It's not possible because it's all in the hands of heaven, and God created us imperfect, which is what defines us as human beings, and that's why the other verse says, the other pasuk says, that Ein Tzadik Ba'aretz Asher Yaseh Hatov V'lo Yechata. There is no righteous man on earth that will do good and not sin. And I'm sorry for changing my accents. Actually, my genuine accent is the Israeli one, but I use both. That and the Yeshivish one. But either way, right, there is no righteous man on earth that does not sin. So fundamentally, we're created imperfect. That's what defines us as human. Yet we're created with the ability of free choice, which also defines us as human. So at least we can be perfect in our choice. At least we could do our best to be perfect in choice. We could have the greatest intention. That we can do. But we cannot have the greatest result. That was left for heaven. The greatest result was only left for heaven. Only God knows what's perfect, and only God does what's perfect. Even when it looks imperfect to us, whatever God does is perfect. Yet it looks imperfect to us because we, in essence, are imperfect. Therefore, most things are going to look imperfect to us, humans. We don't know anything. We are imperfect. God is perfect. What he does is perfect. So leave it all to him. You just need to make the rightest choices for you. That's all you could do. And when you make the rightest choices for you, that is the only thing that you have. Whereas heaven has everything else. But since it is what you have, when you use what you have, then you are giving yourself that individual freedom. And that is being you. Therefore, I'm going to say, in religious pursuit, when you're trying to be a good person, religiously speaking, especially we're going to say, Jewish-wise, right? Because that's who we're talking to. Don't beat yourself up. And that sounds cliche because a lot of people have been saying that now. A lot of rabbis say that. And they're right. You shouldn't beat yourself up. But now we're saying that in a much deeper faculty than just don't beat yourself up. Now we're saying it in don't beat yourself up because you cannot judge yourself based on result. You can only judge yourself based on intention. And you can only judge yourself based on choice. And yes, I admit that choice is harder than just a choice in your brain because genuine choice means if someone has true genuine choice, then probably it will come out in a way that brings at least somewhat of a result. It may not, and that's okay too, but generally it will, right? Choice definitely also implies a level of outward action, of changing something outwardly, of course. Otherwise, it would not be genuine choice. Otherwise, it would not be genuine belief and faith, right? That's something that Jordan Peterson repeats all the time, actually, to bring his name up. But still, we're saying that, yes, so you did make true, genuine choice and you did try, but maybe the result wasn't as you may have liked, but that's okay. Never judge yourself based on result, only judge yourself based on choice. And maybe you made genuine choice in your heart, and maybe outwardly it looked like you didn't do much of a change in action. Maybe you didn't do much action from that ambition and initiation from your choice. So maybe it looked like the choice was a joke. Maybe it looked like it was something you decided in your head or felt in your heart, but it wasn't genuine because it didn't lead to action. Maybe it looks like that, but maybe it's not that. Actually, if it was genuine choice in your heart, and if it was that genuine feeling in your heart, that real genuine, this is what I choose, that real genuine choice, then I say that as long as you made that choice, maybe outwardly it looks like you didn't even try. Maybe it looks like you were not even a shtadel. It looks like you didn't even try. But the truth is you did try because you made the choice. If you made the choice, then you did try. Because when Pirkei Avos says that you can only try to be a man, but then the Gemara says that you can't do anything but only have fear of heaven, which sounds like something that's related to the heart, then yes, the only true trying that exists is that which you decide in your heart. And with that, I leave it off. So don't beat yourself up, because the only true trying is what's in your heart. If you have a good heart, if you have the right intentions, if you have good intentions, and therefore you make the right choices in your heart, well, that's all you have. That's all you can do. That is the faculty that was given to us as humans, because no other being has this the way we have this. That is what we have. Yet heaven has everything else. You understand? God created humans and he created heaven. Humans have free choice. Heaven has everything else. God has both the faculties of the free choice and heaven. But that is the gift that God allotted us, humans. It is the free choice. And we know that the free choice is more lofty than everything else. Free choice is more lofty than heaven, because free choice relates to that word of God, right? When God said, "Let there be light," that is God deciding, that is God having an intention to have there be light, and therefore there was light. Ultimately, if we humans do not see in this world how our intentions in our heart really were righteous and how they actually do make a difference, maybe we won't see it in this world. Maybe it will look like we had it good in our heart and we made the right choices in our heart, yet we didn't do anything about it. Oh wow, we're so lazy. It looks like we're so lazy and nothing happened in this world. Yes, maybe it looks like that, but ultimately it has to bring a result. If you have the right intention in your heart, it will bring a result. Just as when God had the intentions in his heart to create the world, that created the world, that created light, that created everything else. So if God gave us that same faculty to have free choice and to decide intentions in our heart, then it will always create good and it will always make a difference. So whether we see that in this world or not, it will. And hopefully after this world, maybe we will see it. Who knows? That's not something I'm trying to answer. But surely it does create something. So never give up and never judge yourself based on what it looks like outwardly. Rather be happy for your good heart and your good intentions, and continue to make the right choices in your heart, and continue to have the pure faith in your heart. Continue to pursue goodness in your heart. You pursue goodness in your heart, then you will pursue goodness. And also, just even more broadly, the only genuine pursuit that we should have is the pursuit of goodness, which is a core concept in Judaism, in Jewish thought and philosophy. Have a good day, guys. I hope you can relate to my thoughts, and have a good Sunday. Good weekend.